Hello, and you're very welcome to the Turn podcast on this late night edition. It is season 4, episode 26. Well, it's a draw in Dalymount tonight as John Daly's men come back down the M1 with a point. How important will that point be come the end of the season? Only time will tell. Someone who was at the game tonight is Dundalk Democrats' Niall Newbury. Thanks for joining us, Niall. How are you?
How are you, Chris? Great to be on again.
No problem. Niall, just overall your thoughts on the draw tonight. We don't pick up too many points on the road, so is this a welcome point?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends what way you look at it, Chris. I mean, like our record on the road hasn't been good in recent seasons, and particularly our record at Dalymount Park has been quite abysmal actually in the last few years. So, I mean, like a 1-1 draw against Bohemians away from home in isolation is never a bad result. It's obviously just the circumstances around, Drogheda United getting an unlikely win at home against Waterford tonight. Kind of, like instead of us closing the gap on Bohemians and maybe some paths ahead of us in terms of looking above that ninth place, we're now kind of the gap between ourselves and Drogheda is now cut back to 3 points. So I mean, you're kind of looking over your shoulder in that regard again, and it's now I'd say like the fallout of events tonight is probably that ninth place where we are now is probably our ceiling, and it probably confirms tonight that that's about as high as we are going to finish, I'd say, and that's a playoff in November is probably the best we can hope for. But I mean, the game itself, we started off quite poorly. I mean, first 20 minutes was all Bohemians, and when they scored from Ross Tierney, who was excellent throughout the night, in fairness for Bohs, it was a deserved lead for Bohs at that stage. But in fairness, I think we kind of grew into the game after that, and without being spectacular, we never looked brilliant or anything like that. But we managed to pull ourselves into it before the half-hour mark through an equaliser through Darrell Horgan. Kind of fortuitous in the sense that it ricochets off. I think it was the post striker, Grieve, the New Zealander. So, I mean, it's a lucky bounce, I suppose, for Darrell, and he finishes calmly to make it 1-1. And I thought, obviously, Bohs hit the post and Tierney hit the post before half time. But then, second half, it was pretty much a non-event up until the 70th minute when I think Danny Grant had one that kind of flashes across goal or flash wide for Bohs. But in the last 15-20 minutes, Dundalk certainly finished the game the stronger. And if anybody was going to win it at that stage, it was going to be Dundalk. And if Dundalk had snatched it in the dying embers, I don't think it would have been robbery by any stretch of the imagination. I think, to summarise, I think both teams were probably poor enough in their own right, and it wasn't a great game. Draw probably a fair result in the end, but I think if Dundalk had nicked it in the end, I don't think it would have been classified as a robbery at all.
I suppose John Daly tried to mix it up slightly, maybe try to get a little bit more, I don't know, like bringing in Dervin into the middle, dropping Hikiki and Pike coming in on the left. What did you feel was John Daly's thoughts behind that? Was it just to shore up the defence a little bit more experience in there with Pike? I know he's a right footer, but he did say he can play on right and left. So did it make sense to maybe bring him in and just take Sean Keogh out and bring him back in again to the squad at some stage?
I suppose, I mean, I could see John Daly's, thinking behind it. I mean, Sean Keogh, look, he's only a young lad. I don't think he's done badly at all. He's still learning on the job, of course, as an 18-year-old should be. But Dan Pike came in, a right footer playing at left full. I thought, to be honest with you, Dan Pike struggled quite a lot in the first half.
Okay.
Everything Bohs seemed to be doing was coming through that channel, and they seemed to have pinpointed Dan Pike as like a weak link almost, it seemed. So look, he mixed up a wee bit. Look, it's a very, I suppose, even though we're halfway through the season or well past the halfway point, of the season, it's still this is a new Dundalk team. even from the one that started it, you know,
Yeah.
that start the season. Like today, you got Felix Goddard in goal, you know, Bobby Faulkner, Dan Pike in defence, Scott McGill, Aid Dervin. You know, these are all players that have just been brought in the last few weeks. You know what I mean? And these are all new players. So obviously, Jadakiki came off the bench as well. So there's a lot of new players. Josh O'Connor was on the bench, didn't come on today.
Mm-hmm.
Latest signing. So it's kind of difficult in a situation like this because you are battling relegation, and you know you've got our back four and our goalkeeper, for example, looked completely different. 4 weeks ago. Do you know what I mean? So, that's a problem in itself. The midfield today, the two players in midfield, McGill and Dervin, you know, again only fresh in the door. Look, I think in terms of team selection, he made a couple of changes, but maybe it's the fact that, you know, we lost in Drogheda last week in the cup. He maybe just wanted to mix up a wee bit. You know, and in fairness, like we struggled. I thought for most of the first half we sort of struggled tonight, but I think we kind of did improve as the game wore on, I suppose, without being spectacular. It wasn't. I don't think if you're a neutral tonight, you're particularly enjoying that game. I'm not sure Dundalk supporters or certainly Bow supporters really enjoyed it either. There's a lot of groans. I was in the home stand, you know, where the press was situated, and you know, I don't think any Bohemians fan was too. Like, there was a lot of groans coming from their end. It's hard to kind of it's hard to kind of see, or hard to kind of work out who the happier of the teams will be tonight. I don't think the point does majorly a whole pile for either team. To be honest, it probably. You could argue maybe better for Bows, keeps them, you know, above that parapet of the bottom two, and keeps that gap as status quo.
Yeah.
Whereas a loss for them tonight would have been a total disaster. So even though they have them a couple of games in hand, but suddenly it puts a bit of pressure on them. So, you know, in a twisted sort of way, they're probably the happier of the sides. Certainly given how the game finished in the last 15, 20 minutes, where Dundalk did kind of, I thought when Robbie Mahan and Jadakiki came off the bench, that really injected a real fresh impetus into Dundalk's play. And you know, I thought Robbie Mahan was superb when he came on, and Hakiki, in fairness to him, has been a bright spark in recent weeks. You know, certainly there are two players that we should probably look at in the latter quarter of the season now, as two real creative outlets that could be utilised.
I suppose one person that came under the spotlight in the cup match with Drogheda was Felix Goddard. Pulled off a hell of a save in the opening minutes, a one-on-one with Ross Tierney. You know, he spread himself very, very big on that. Would he be a little disappointed with the goal that conceded? You know, he gets his hand to that one. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, and just in the interest of fairness, I think it is. It's a remarkable save in the early stages. Actually, he really does what all good goalkeepers do. He makes himself so big, and it's actually a really good save from Tierney, so early in the game as well.
Exactly.
I think that was 5 minutes or something. So you know, you could be really up a certain creek with a paddle,
which we found ourselves in plenty of times.
Which we did, and we end up finding ourselves in anyway later on in the half. But I mean, the goal on 18 minutes, I mean, it's a cross. You know, Dale Rooney puts the cross in. I mean, you could argue that Dundalk should probably defend it better. It's not a particularly powerful hit from Tierney. It's a good hit, but you know, Goddard, you know, he gets a hand to it. I think any goalkeeper, Chris, in that scenario would be disappointed if they haven't saved it. In that instance, I mean,
I think because he's just outside the 6-yard box when he volleys it, it's very hard to react that quickly to try to get over. I think the disappointing thing for me when I seen it is when the initial cross comes in, we had it clear, but it's like we were a bit slow to kind of reset ourselves. Like for me, I don't think Ross Tierney should have the time to take a volley inside the box. We should have been challenging that like we did on the first cross in, and even the time that Dale Rooney gets to put that, you know, you're looking for Ryan O'Kane to get over to Dale Rooney a little quicker to close that down, because Dale Rooney gets his foot onto the ball, has time to look up and then whip the cross in. You know, that should be too much time for me. You know, and I'm sure that's something that John Daly will be saying to them coming back, saying, you know, the initial cross comes in, we defend it, and we defend it well, but the ball just come out and recycle back in, and we're not quick enough to any of those players to close it down, or to cut out the cross, or to actually clear that cross before. For me, I think there's 2-3 opportunities we had to nullify that attack, and that's the disappointing thing. And then, like you say, with Goddard getting his hands on the ball, he's probably will be disappointed. The fact that he did get his hands on it, that he didn't save it. So maybe it's four opportunities we had to stop that goal that we didn't get, and that's the disappointing thing for me.
Absolutely. And just on that point, just going back to that as well, I mean, like when the ball does come back in, I'd actually think it's Dan Pike who actually completely just, like, Ross Tierney is completely, like, he's got so much space and time. I think it is Dan Pike who kind of loses him a little bit, kind of loses his marker, and when that second cross comes in from Rooney, I mean, I think it's, look, you can put that down to a bit of rustiness. Dan Pike's obviously played Tranmere, and their season finished in May. I mean, he hasn't played football in a few months, like, so maybe you can put it down to a bit of cobwebs or whatever. But I mean, I thought himself and Scott McGill in that first half struggled a little bit. This is maybe the issue with maybe bringing in players halfway through a season who are out of season. It can take them a little bit of time to get up to speed, and obviously John Daly's alluded to that anyway. But it will take these boys a bit of time to get up to speed. But yeah, I think it's also this in relation to Goddard. I mean, I think it's probably more so the fact that he made that horrendous error last week in Drogheda, which obviously puts more spotlight on the goal today. I think if that goal doesn't go in the fashion it did last week, maybe we're not talking so much about should he have saved the one tonight, or like there's obviously a lot of attention drawn to Felix Goddard now, which Dundalk, goalkeeping's been a major issue this season for Dundalk, and he's the fourth option that we've used this year. After obviously, George Shelby, Ross Monroe, and Sean Malloy, he's the fourth option they've used, and you've still got Peter Cherry in reserve there as well. So it's been a real problem position, and there's naturally going to be a lot of attention and spotlight on that. And I think my instinct was that he probably should have saved it and kept it out, but there's probably more of an issue there than just the goalkeeper for that goal, I'd say.
Yeah, of course, goalkeeping mistakes in Drogheda seem to be a running theme, as they were again tonight. The manner that we got ourselves back in, less than 10 minutes, we got ourselves back in on this. It's a good challenge by Robbie Benson in the middle of the park, and it unleashes Gullen. And it's something that we've probably seen from Gullen in the Pats match, and we just haven't seen it often enough. But he's a confidence. He just gets on the ball, beats his man on the turn. And the thing I liked about that is he, the fact he just took him on the outside and realized, because how many times have we all said it, get yourself into the box, because when it goes in, the defenders don't want to touch it because they know any sort of contact is going to be a penalty here. Yeah. So the defender has to back away. Gullen gets his head up, tries to put one across the box. Like you say, it gets cut out by the Bows player, but right back into the path of Darrell Horgan, who lashed it on the double nutmeg. You don't see them too often, either defender and the keeper, and into the back of the net. And Darrell's hit a bit of form, in particular, since John Daly's come in.
Absolutely. And just to go on the goal, I mean, just before I go into Darrell, Jamie Gullen does brilliantly for that goal, actually. I mean, Jamie Gullen's taken a bit of stick, maybe for not scoring as many goals as you want your number 9 to score this season, but I think some of his general play is actually really, really good. I think, I mean, I've alluded to it on this podcast a few times. I think his the way he brings players into the game, and sometimes his hold-up play can be very good. He probably would play. I've spoken to a few people, as well. I mean, I think a lot of people are in agreement that he'd probably be better with somebody up there with him in that sense, because he's not a goal scorer, if that makes sense, but he's still, a tidy footballer, and he has a lot to offer. And the goal today was kind of, really epitomised that. He leaves Leigh Kavanagh for absolute dead. Like, he completely skins him and pulls it back, and obviously, Grieva tries to cut it out, but it only goes as far as Darrell Horgan, and it's a great finish, of course. And you're right. I spoke to Darrell just after the game, just in reference to, how his form sort of improved, and he is starting to add more goals to his game. And it's something John Daly actually, pinpointed very early on in the job, that, he wanted Darrell Horgan to get more involved in sort of that attack and play and show what he can offer. I mean, like, he's looked a new player. I think since John Daly's come in, he's really looked like the Darrell Horgan of old. He's really getting, I think John Daly even said it's one of the main reasons why he took the job was because Darrell Horgan was at the club, and that kind of testament to the quality. Like, it wasn't that long ago Darrell Horgan was, in the Ireland team. He's got 17 caps for Ireland. I mean, this isn't some fella who got like 1 cap, 2 caps, 10 years ago.
True.
This is a fella who's got the bones of 20 caps, only a couple of seasons ago, basically. So, I mean, he's coming in with a very high pedigree and a very high profile, and we probably hadn't seen the best of him since he came back. I think John Daly's really starting to, bring that confidence back into his play, and he's playing with a real swagger again, and I think he could very well be the difference. A player of that quality could very well be the difference between Dundalk, being in the Premier Division or the First Division next season. And I think, yeah.
No, like, do you think it's something I think myself and Steph might have talked about before on this, but do you think it's any coincidence with John Daly being, a forward player in his day, that when he's come in, he's managed to transform Dundalk in an attacking manner? But in particular, I'm looking at Ryan O'Kane, Darrell Horgan, like I said, he probably got the best out of Gullin for, the 2-3 games that he was there. And hopefully if he gets him back somewhat fit, we might get something of that. And, scoring goals was something we were struggling with before he came in, but he's kind of turned that from us now that we are a team. You expect him, to hit the net every single game at least.
Yeah.
Like, it can't be any surprise that suddenly there's a massive turnaround in form for the likes of Darrell Horgan since John Daly's come in.
Yeah, Darrell Horgan, Ryan O'Kane, Jamie Gullin, among others, these are all players that are now suddenly playing with their heads up again. Whereas, I think the likes of Ryan O'Kane maybe playing with their heads down. Horgan, these players are probably playing with their heads down, not necessarily because of any particular manager. I think it was more so because of just the sheer dysfunction around the club in general. I mean, for counting caretakers, you had 4 different, four different voices, and the season wasn't even halfway through at that point. You know what I mean? So that's going to cause any kind of that's going to cause a lot of friction in any dressing room, and a lot of disillusionment in any dressing room, I'm sure, or in any workplace for that matter. So I think, I mean, they're playing with a smile. Like, and it probably does help, that John Daly was a striker by trade in his own heyday. I mean, he obviously knows what's needed, but he seems to be a confidence-based manager. I mean, I think it might have been you, Chris, who alluded. You spotted in one of the early games. He's putting his arm around certain players. And, he's giving them that bit of a lift. Even if things haven't gone particularly well for them on a certain night, he's trying to keep that confidence level up all the time.
But he does the same with talking up Darrell Horgan, and then Darrell Horgan suddenly hits form. He done the same with Ryan O'Kane. Then suddenly Ryan O'Kane starts scoring. He definitely seems to be a very good man manager, is what I would say. He understands the players that need the arm put around, maybe a little confidence booster, and then the others he expects certain level of them. But I think he's definitely understands, and I think I always thought Stephen Kenny was always very good at that as well. Understood the players that just needed that extra little boost of confidence, and he definitely seems to be able to identify that with players, and you can see the reaction in those players.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, he seems to have got that tune out of them all right, and took the words out of my mouth, Chris. I mean, his man management skills appear, certainly from where I am, certainly appear to be quite good. I mean, and like, obviously, look, Dundalk in the last few years have operated with a sort of a head coach sort of model. I mean, you've never brought in a manager. Probably the first one we probably had of that title since Stephen Kenny. So, like, when you're a manager, you aren't just managing the club, you're managing people. You aren't just managing the business, you aren't just managing the service. You're managing people, and that's basically what John Daly has to do as well as anything else, as much as anything else. So he seems to be doing a good job on that front at the moment.
True. And he also doesn't seem to be one for throwing anyone under the bus or anything like that. Like, he seems to want to take the criticism off players. Like, we've seen big mistakes from players, yet he's never called anyone out for anything. Big misses from players or anything like that. He seems to be very good at protecting the players. Maybe it could be something he's identified, and that's why we're in the position we might be quite frail as a team. So he seems to be more than happy to take the brunt of criticism or anything like that. and kind of protect
Yeah.
his players a lot more. And I think that's something different that we probably didn't see under previous managerial regimes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the closest thing he's come to, I mean, obviously Felix Goddard made a mistake last week, and of course he identified it, and didn't shy away from that fact, and it was in the reports this week. But I mean, he obviously identified it, but on the same hand said, look, he's a goalkeeper. When goalies make a mistake, it usually causes a goal. So it's how he reacts to it, it's how he responds to it, and that was basically John Daly's that was how he kind of saw it. I mean, it wasn't the case of like, I'm going to throw my goalie under the bus here, or obviously, we saw earlier on the season when George Shelby made a series of mistakes against Sligo. He was hauled off at half time, which was, serious vote of no confidence in your goalkeeper. And, I mean, I think John Daly, in fairness to him, not knocking previous managers or anything like that, but I think John Daly, he seems to have a very calm demeanor, a calm and influence. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't get too carried away after a win in post-match or anything like that. Doesn't get too downbeat after a defeat either. And I think younger players, who are maybe low in confidence, might respond better to that kind of attitude. And I'm assuming it's kind of similar in the dressing room. It's let's get up and go. We have to go again. There's no point in dwelling on certain performances where, like, Stephen O'Donnell, obviously on more occasion than one, had kept players in the dressing room for like nearly an hour after matches sometimes. Unfortunately for Stephen, it probably didn't work for him in the end, because he ended up, I think he
maybe doing it one too many times.
Yeah, he'd probably be the first to admit himself now that he probably lost the dressing room as a result of some of that sort of maybe over emotional sort of response to certain things, even in certain press conferences as well, where there was a few outbursts and stuff like that, which probably don't help in retrospect. I think he'd be the first. Like, Stephen's a young man, obviously. He's obviously learning from that, I'm sure.
Yeah, he was feeling the pressure at that stage too.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and it's a pressure environment, and I think John Daly just seems to be a lot more sort of calm and collected. Now I'm saying that now, if we lose 4 or 5 in the spin, things could obviously change, and if difficult questions start to get asked in these post-match pressers. But for the moment, at least, he doesn't seem to be getting too downbeat or downtrodden after defeats. He seems to be keeping a very level sort of head here and saying, look, our objective here is to stay in the Premier Division, and that's the bottom line. And we're still very much on course to do that, of course. And I think given time, I think he will do a good job. But I just think he needs to be given that time. And I think the Dog supporters, in fairness, have probably come to that conclusion now that we do need patience after this season. I think it's been a very sort of sobering season for the Dog supporters. I think that we have now finally come to the conclusion that we're not where we were a few years ago. So it's going to be a real rebuilding process now. And I think John Daly is a steady pair of hands to maybe lead that.
You mentioned it already, Niall. Just probably what opened up the game in particular in the second half was the substitutes coming in, Akiki, Mahan, and even Owen Kenny coming in later on. Yeah. All have big chances. I suppose all these players are going to play a massive part in the survival bid from us before the end of the season. But Robbie Mann's been one that we've only just seen glimpses of. I think it was probably this fixture, the first time around we've seen the best of him, and then go off injury, unfortunately, in that first half. But there's definitely a baller in there, isn't there? Like he can carry a ball. He's got the confidence for it. Like he's definitely a player you would think that we could do it at his peak, in particularly now and the run into the end of the season.
Absolutely, yeah. Robbie Mahan, I mean, I don't know whether it was an injury or what it was. He just didn't seem to be getting a run in the team for whatever reason.
Yeah, he went off in this fixture the first time. It looked like he'd done his calf or something that
night. Yeah, so even in pre-season and early in the season, I thought, when he signed, he also got the number 10 shirt as well. And you're thinking this could be a real game changer for us. He obviously came back from Scottish football. Had a spell with Motherwell after beating up Bohemians, obviously a very bright young talent. But like, as you can see tonight, I mean, he's got some great technical ability. He's very good on the ball. It's unfortunate that we haven't seen as much of him this season. I think because he's a real creative outlet for us. And I thought when he came off the bench, himself and Jadakiki, when they came off the bench, and obviously Owen Kenny as well, as you mentioned there, Chris. I mean, had a couple of great chances. He won, the header, the free header. He probably feel now that he probably could have done better with that. And then he obviously has the one right at the death that kind of whistles just wide, which could have.
That's nearly becoming his little trademark move, though, isn't it? He loves drawing into defenders and then drops the shoulder, opens up, and bends one. We've seen him do it at Shells as well.
Yeah.
And cracked off the crossbar that night.
That's right, yeah, and he seems to be a very good impact player. Actually, I mean, he started a couple of games, and he probably struggled starting from the off in some matches recently. But whenever he's come off the bench, with Dundalk chasing a goal, he's really made a difference, and he seems to be at the moment a real good impact player for Dundalk, and a really good weapon to bring off the substitutes bench, because he's he really does get in the face of the opposition, and he's quite a menacing presence. And really could have had a couple of goals there tonight on another day. So, substitutions worked quite well for John Daly and Dundalk tonight. There was a real attacking impetus kind of, injected there with those three players. And I think that's kind of, that is synonymous with, that is when we actually sort of started to play a wee bit. And it was in that last 15, 20 minutes where we could and probably should have nearly won the game in the end. And it would have been a much different story then if we hadn't done that, because suddenly you're looking at Pats and Bows, and they're starting to get very nervous all of a sudden. So look, it just wasn't to be, unfortunately. And look, the objective for John Daly and the remit would have been to get a playoff and avoid automatic relegation, because when he came into the job, it was looking very unlikely that we were going to even get a playoff. So I think he's done a tremendous job, John Daly, since he's come in terms of steadying it a wee bit and getting us out of that bottom position. Anything other than that is now a bonus, I'd say. And I think realistically, we're probably looking at a playoff at best. It's probably the ceiling for us. So it's all about preparing for that.
Yeah, look, I think otherwise you'd be thinking this point on the road was an ideal point and something to kind of build on. But of course, that Drogheda United beating Waterford 2-0 tonight.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, they closed that gap now from 5 down to 3. It's probably still important, and I think John Daly alluded to in his post-match interview that we just have to look after ourselves. It's not about the points that they're picking up; it's what we're picking up. And then we're facing Galway at home next Friday. Like, we've seen Galway on fantastic form. Looks like they've rebuilt very well in this window as well. We never find it easy up against them. In particular, it's not going to be easy again, but we have found, probably not of recent form, but previously we found ourselves very hard to beat in Oriel Park. We need to try to find that again, but we got to go one further and try to win that. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a tough game. I mean, Galway obviously flying high this season, having a very good first season back in the top flight. They've beaten us twice this year. I mean, they beat us in Oriel, back in February, and they beat us in at Dalymount DC Park in what was John Daly's, I suppose, first official match in charge, even though he was only off the plane that day. But it was still he was still there in the dugout, and he took responsibility that night in Galway. So, yeah, so I mean, it's an opportunity to get one back. I was talking to Darrell and John, obviously, after the game, and they didn't really, Darrell in particular didn't really want to use that word revenge as such. It's more just trying to, pick up points and look after ourselves, basically. And John was obviously asked about, the Drogheda result tonight, and John, he said the same thing to us. It was a case of like, I'm not interested in Drogheda. He more or less said, I've no interest in Drogheda's results. I'm only interested in what we're going to do. And because at the end of the day, he's probably right, because we've no control over that. All we can do at Dundalk is just keep trying to get points on the board and pull ourselves away from Drogheda. And Galway next week is an opportunity. I mean, yes, they've beaten us twice this year, but they're
not free scoring either.
They're not. No, they don't score a lot of goals. They're actually quite. I think I read some ridiculous stat about had they scored less goals than us at one stage or something like that.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and they were. In fact, I'm actually looking at it now. They've only scored one more goal than we have,
And I think
this
their
season.
form, their goals away from
Um,
home are particularly hard to come by as well.
yeah, so it's an opportunity to maybe get some points on the board. I mean, they're not unbeatable by any stretch of imagination.
Mm-hmm.
A typical John Caulfield team are going to be very hard to break down. They've only conceded 16,
Yeah.
and only Shells have conceded less than that, and they're top of the table. So I mean, defensively they're very resolute and very hard to break down, as you'd expect a John Caulfield team to be. But who knows?
Who expected to draw the result tonight?
Exactly, yeah. So I mean, it's a very sort of cutthroat league in that sense. I mean, one bad performance, and regardless of who you're playing, and you're probably getting beaten. Is the reality of this league this year, and it's a very competitive league, and it's a very tight league. Look, we scored the least goals as well. This is the other side of it, below Galway. But I mean, we've already mentioned on the podcast here that there's been a fresh impetus in our attack. We've got Josh O'Connor, of course, who didn't come off the bench tonight, still to come in as well. Our new striker. So what's to say he won't hit the ground running as well? So, I mean,
would you like to see maybe two up front on this?
I mean, I would. I mean, I don't see what we have to lose by playing two up front. I mean, I just think we have to get back to basics, especially where we are. I mean, Jamie Gullen's a good footballer, but I just don't think he operates as a lone striker. I mean, he's not a 25 plus goal season striker. So he's not necessarily a target man either. He comes across as just a kind of a good technical footballer who just needs somebody with him, I think. And if you play another striker up there, I mean, I don't see what you have to lose. To be honest with you, and I think it's definitely something worth trying, especially with the options we have now. You've obviously got Jamie Gullen, you've got Josh O'Connor there as well now, and you have obviously Owen Kenny. You have options.
And probably when we're at home, the onus is on us to take it to the opposition as well. And perhaps, like I say, you see in the last two games with Drogheda actually playing two up front, it's so unusual in this league as well, because it's usually always one striker. So it's something different for defenders as well. And maybe that could be a key just to unlock a few wins.
Yeah, but Drogheda have obviously also identified that they just need to get back to basics and do the simple. I mean, people might say it's primitive football, but sometimes you just need to be like that. Do you know what I mean?
I take primitive football and avoid this playoff if possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, because the Dog's in survival mode now, and that's the way we got to look at it. I mean, we're not going to stay up. No one's going to give us any praise for playing nice football and losing every week. We got to just try and be a bit more direct. And I think we have been at different times in different games. Of course, we have, and we have been we've been flexible in that sense at different times in the season. But I mean, I don't see what you have to stand to lose by playing, two men up front next week against Galway. I think it's something worth trying. We're a team that's struggling to score goals, but we have some of our better attacking players, as we mentioned, are playing with a bit more confidence now, and we're starting to create a lot more than we were. I think Jada Kiki's been a very good signing for us so far. He has, and obviously Robbie Mahon could be a new signing if we can get him the full fitness now for this last quarter of the season. So these are all positives, and there is plenty of positives to take from tonight's performance. I mean, and tonight's game in general. There was definitely positives there, and there has been in recent weeks. And I think
even picking up a point on the road, when we haven't picked up that many points, we haven't picked that many points in Dublin alone. Never mind just away matches. So that's also important. Are we missing Andy Boyle?
Oh, tremendously, yeah. I mean, and Andy Boyle's a tremendous miss, and that's no disrespect to Mayo Anamasahoon or Bobby Faulkner. I think the experience of Andy Boyle in that back. I mean, it's no coincidence that it's obviously your home record of not conceding goals. We went on that run of 7 or 8 matches where we didn't concede a goal at home, and it's no coincidence that since Andy's got injured that we started to leak goals and look a bit more vulnerable at the back again. I just think his experience and his ability and everything that comes with that, and his leadership as well, of course, at the back, is just something that cannot be underestimated. And it's only now that he's kind of out of the team that we've really seen how much of a miss he's actually been. And hopefully the road to recovery is not sooner rather than later for him. To be honest, because I think he's probably too good a player for us to be missing at the minute, and I think he's to say he's an important part of our team at the minute would be an understatement. I think he had a tremendous spell there before he got injured, which is just unfortunate. But hopefully, fingers crossed, it's not too long. I think he's returning to training maybe this week, so that's I suppose another positive sort of take, and hopefully he'll be fit enough for the running when the running really starts there now coming up, because he could be crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Niall, we really appreciate you jumping on. It's into the small hours of the morning now. It's time to get some sleep. We'll be back as normal after the Galway match, and we'll do our usual man of the match competition and everything. Thanks again, Niall, and until
problem, Chris.
next Friday, come on to town.